Demonolatry is the debut full-length album from death metal band Abhorration, and we could call them a death thrash metal band, just for the sake of 80s death metal being a big part of what they are, and their sound being derived from that kind of 89 to 92 era of death metal that was driven from late 80s thrash metal, essentially. The thing about this record, there's a couple of obvious things I could say that are just clear as day when you step into this record, and that I think the first thing is that if you love Altars of Madness, you'll understand the vernacular, the general language that this record speaks, because it takes very clear references from that record and expands upon them in a variety of ways. I wouldn't say it's a direct rip, but there's definitely some exciting moments on this record that are kind of pulling from that, kind of in the same way that Superstition's record did several years ago, where you really get the reference right away if you know that record inside and out, especially the Abominations of Desolation era sound of that band, as well as the like Thy Kingdom Come and whatnot. But anyway, this comes from Norwegian folks out of Oslo, and you'll recognize Magnus Gerritsen from Condor, a great black thrash metal band that unfortunately split up, and he's also in a band Hecatomb, who've only put out a 7-inch, I think, so far. But he brought in a drummer who played on Unstoppable Power from Condor, and a bassist from a band named Mabuse, which I'm not all that familiar with. They put out a tape in 2021. I thought it was great. It was one of my favorite demos of 2021. I had nothing but praise for it. And apparently Ira Torp of Necromantian and Obliteration was added as a lead guitarist of the band. Beyond that recording, I think he was the engineer on that recording, and I think from that point they put together these songs. I think most of it's still mainly written by Garrison, but the way that I describe this is there's certainly the Possessed and Slayer style death thrash here, but if you're a fan of Necrovore and sadistic intense conflict within demo tape, and maybe bands like Mortem even, you'll understand exactly the reference of the sound design here. It's not that it sounds necessarily just like a rotten 80s demo tape, but that their style comes directly from there, as we found a lot of bands who showed up around the time of Altars of Madness and put their own spin on the way that death metal had been developing at that point. So there's certainly a heaviness to it, but it's kind of their own thing the way they piece it together. And that is classic old school death metal, primarily just focused on that one node of it. So you'll get exactly what I'm talking about as we hit this clip, and then I'll talk about how they kind of push it a little bit further on this record versus the demo tape. So at their most extreme on this record, Abhorration sound a little bit like the first Angel Corpse record, where there's a little bit of a looseness and a brutality applied to the traditional Morbid Angel sound on the first two records, and that leads to a certain cadence which is more extreme, and not just a carbon copy of Altar of Madness, although you'll kind of get that feeling anyway as you sit with the record and with it on repeat. They're kind of pulling it together so that this has a certain flow to it that is natural and has that 80s death thrash metal sound to it. That is most of what I need to say about this record. There's some obvious points where they take a little bit from Death and the first Death record, and a couple other little notes to take in there. But really, this is a riff record. It is one that is all about exciting and intense songs, and some of them are tuneful, some of them are just ripping. All of it is pretty memorable, and while it is familiar in some sense, it's too much, like, I don't want to say it's fun, but there's a certain approach to it that is too exciting and entertaining to deny, just because it sounds like the earliest Florida death metal beyond the demo era of that kind of deal. So for me, I love this stuff. It's exactly up my alley, and this is a great version of it. I think that they could push it further in terms of making it a little bit more ragged and 80s sounding. They could push it in a direction that's more technical. They could do any number of things with it, because the sound has been mutated in so many ways over the years. But I like that they arrived upon this sound that is exactly that pure. It has that much thrash metal in it, and there's always an aggressive, energetic attack behind all of it. So It really just feels great to listen to this record, and it's one of my favorite styles. I really think the art and the way they put this record together, the way it flows, it's just perfect in the way that it plays out. Again, it's not that original, but it's such a good example of this sound, and it's a little bit more rooted in just a little bit more memorable songs. I feel like this is a very high recommendation on my part. I think that most people will pick up on the approachability of it right away and just appreciate the record they put together here. So check it out for yourself. That released on October 4th, and I think the actual vinyl version and all that is coming out in early November. And go ahead and read my review for more notes overall. Runs up and into my void, abandoned the falling in the pit before me.